Welcome to Tech with Kaushik. This is part 5 of our complete practice question series for the SC-100 Microsoft Cybersecurity Architect Expert exam. Choose your answer before the timer ends. Then review the correct answer, explanation, and exam tip. Let us begin part 5. Question number 154. Scenario. A global enterprise is designing the hierarchy beneath the landing zone's management group. Workload subscriptions must be placed into archetype-aligned groups that distinguish workloads requiring connectivity to corporate networks from workloads that can operate as internet-facing or isolated services. Which workload characteristic should determine the archetype-aligned management groups? The available options are as follows. Option A, software development lifecycle environments. Option B, data center geographical locations. Option C, hybrid connectivity requirements. Option D, internal billing and chargeback structures. The correct answer is option C, hybrid connectivity requirements. Here's why. The Azure landing zone conceptual architecture commonly separates workload subscriptions into archetypes according to connectivity and governance requirements, such as corporate connected and online workloads. Why are the other options not correct? A. Development, test, and production subscriptions can exist within an archetype, but the management group hierarchy should not be built primarily around SDLC stages. B. Management groups should not mirror physical data center or Azure region geography unless a specific policy boundary requires it. D. Billing structures can be represented with tags, subscriptions, and cost management constructs rather than defining the security and policy hierarchy. Exam tip. Design management groups around policy and connectivity archetypes, not organizational charts, billing models, or deployment environments. Question number 155. Scenario. An organization enables Defender Cloud Security Posture Management across Azure, AWS, and Google Cloud. The security graph must include workload vulnerability information so attack path analysis can identify exploitable routes through the multi-cloud environment. Which supporting capability should the architect enable? The available options are as follows. Option A, Microsoft Defender External Attack Surface Management. Option B, Regulatory Compliance Assessments. Option C, Agentless Scanning. Option D, Microsoft Cloud Security Benchmark Assignments. The correct answer is option C, Agentless Scanning. Here's why. Defender CSPM attack path analysis uses information from the cloud security graph. Agentless scanning adds vulnerability and configuration context for supported Azure, AWS, and GCP workloads, allowing attack paths involving exploitable weaknesses to be identified. Why are the other options not correct? A. Defender ESM discovers externally exposed assets from an outside-in perspective, but does not populate the internal multi-cloud security graph with workload vulnerability data. B. Regulatory compliance maps assessments to standards, but does not supply the workload scanning required for vulnerability-based attack paths. D. MCSB provides control recommendations and assessment mappings, but is not the scanning capability that discovers exploitable workload weaknesses. Exam tip. Defender CSPM provides attack path analysis, while agentless scanning supplies important vulnerability context used in those paths. Question number 156. Scenario. A company monitors Microsoft Teams and Viva Engage communications through Microsoft Purview Communication Compliance. Microsoft 365 groups must enter or leave the policy scope automatically according to custom Exchange attributes. The organization wants to avoid maintaining separate policies for each group. Which scoping capability should the architect recommend? The available options are as follows. Option A, Microsoft Purview Sensitivity Labels. Option B, Administrative Units. Option C, Adaptive Scopes. Option D, Microsoft Defender XD or User Tags. The correct answer is option C, Adaptive Scopes. Here's why. Adaptive scopes dynamically include users, sites, or Microsoft 365 groups according to attribute-based queries. One communication compliance policy can use adaptive scopes and automatically update its coverage as Exchange attributes change. Why are the other options not correct? A. Sensitivity labels classify and protect content rather than dynamically scope communication compliance policies. B. Administrative units delegate administrative responsibility but are not the attribute query mechanism for policy membership. D. Defender XD are user tags assist investigation and alert prioritization but do not control purview policy assignment. Exam tip. Use adaptive scopes when compliance policy membership must change automatically according to user or group attributes. Question number 157. Scenario. A security operations center uses Microsoft Sentinel with Microsoft 365 and Defender XD or telemetry. The team must import known malicious IP addresses and malware indicators from an external threat intelligence provider. Sentinel must create incidents when collected events contain a command and control address from the imported intelligence. Complete the threat intelligence architecture. Complete each statement by selecting the appropriate option from its drop-down list. Statement 1. Ingest the external indicators by configuring the blank. The choices for Statement 1 are a playbook, a threat intelligence data connector, a custom entity activity, or a threat indicator. Statement 2. Correlate events with the indicators and generate incidents by configuring the blank. The choices for Statement 2 are a scheduled query rule, a threat intelligence data connector, a playbook, or a custom entity activity. For Statement 1, the correct selection is a threat intelligence data connector. The connector brings supported threat intelligence objects and indicators into Sentinel. For Statement 2, the correct selection is a scheduled query rule. The rule periodically queries event data, matches indicators, and can create alerts and incidents. Exam tip. Connectors ingest threat intelligence. Analytics rules operationalize it against security telemetry. Question number 158. Scenario. An organization must discover SaaS applications used from managed endpoints, permit applications with acceptable Microsoft risk ratings, and block applications classified as high risk. For the statement, select yes if the proposed solution meets the requirement. Otherwise, select no. Statement 1. Enable SaaS security posture management in Defender for cloud apps and create an access policy to sanction applications according to their cloud discovery risk ratings. Statement 1. Enable SaaS security posture management in Defender for cloud apps and create an access policy to sanction applications according to their cloud discovery risk ratings. The answer is no. Cloud discovery and unsanctioned application enforcement are required for risk catalog-based SaaS blocking. Exam tip. SSBM evaluates SaaS configuration posture. Cloud discovery identifies and scores SaaS applications used by the organization. Question number 159. Scenario. A company uses conditional access app control with SharePoint Online and Dropbox. When a SharePoint file is downloaded, Defender for Cloud Apps must inspect its content and apply a sensitivity label during the active session. Dropbox authentication must be permitted only from Intune-compliant devices. Select the Defender for Cloud Apps policy type for each requirement. Complete each statement by selecting the appropriate option from its drop-down list. Statement 1. Apply the label during a SharePoint download by using the blank. The choices for Statement 1 are a file policy, a session policy, or an activity policy. Statement 2. Restrict Dropbox sign-in according to device compliance by using the blank. The choices for Statement 2 are an OAuth app policy, an activity policy, or an access policy. For Statement 1, the correct selection is a session policy. Session controls inspect and modify supported file actions in real time. For Statement 2, the correct selection is an access policy. Access policies allow or block the cloud app session according to device and authentication conditions. Exam tip. Use access policies to control whether a session starts and session policies to control actions performed inside the session. Question number 160. Scenario. Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management identifies endpoint configuration weaknesses and sends remediation requests to Microsoft Intune administrators. The administrators need a centralized Intune view containing the requested changes and affected devices. Which endpoint security area should they review? The available options are as follows. Option A, Attack Surface Reduction. Option B, Device Compliance. Option C, security tasks. Option D, endpoint detection and response. The correct answer is option C, security tasks. Here's why. Microsoft Intune security tasks receive remediation requests created from Microsoft Defender vulnerability management recommendations. They show the recommendation, affected devices, status, and remediation workflow for Intune administrators. Why are the other options not correct? A. Attack surface reduction policies configure preventive endpoint controls but do not display Defender vulnerability management remediation requests. B. Device compliance evaluates whether devices meet compliance rules and supplies compliance status to conditional access. D. Endpoint detection and response policies configure Defender for endpoint onboarding and EDR behavior rather than reviewing vulnerability remediation tasks. Exam tip. Defender vulnerability management identifies and prioritizes changes. Intune security tasks coordinate their remediation. Question number 161. Scenario. An organization is integrating security validation into an Azure DevOps delivery lifecycle. Source code must undergo static analysis during continuous integration, and a lightweight validation must confirm that the deployed production release is operational and securely reachable. Select the pipeline stage for each test. Complete each statement by selecting the appropriate option from its drop-down list. Statement 1. Run static application security testing during the blank. The choices for Statement 1 are source code commit only, build and test, or production deployment. Statement 2. Run security smoke testing when the release the blank. The choices for Statement 2 are enter source control, is built and tested, or goes to production. For Statement 1, the correct selection is build and test. SSD belongs in automated CI validation, so vulnerable code fails before release. For Statement 2, the correct selection is goes to production. Smoke tests verify that the deployed production release starts, and its essential controls operate as expected. Exam tip. Run static analysis before deployment and lightweight smoke validation immediately after deployment. Question number 162. Scenario. A web application is built from code stored in Azure repos and deployed first to a test environment. The DevSecOps architecture must analyze source code before deployment and test the running application for exploitable behavior after it reaches the test environment. Select the security testing method for each stage. Complete each statement by selecting the appropriate option from its drop-down list. Statement 1. Test the source code before deployment by using the blank. The choices for Statement 1 are penetration testing, dynamic application security testing, static application security testing, or security smoke testing. Statement 2. Test the running application in the test environment by using the blank. The choices for Statement 2 are static application security testing, security acceptance testing, dynamic application security testing, or security smoke testing. For Statement 1, the correct selection is static application security testing. SSD identifies insecure code patterns during the development and build lifecycle. For Statement 2, the correct selection is dynamic application security testing. DSD sends requests to the deployed application and evaluates its externally observable security behavior. Exam tip. SSD examines code before deployment. DSD examines a running application after deployment. Question number 163. Scenario. An organization uses Microsoft intra-conditional access to secure access across its hybrid endpoints. IT administrators belong to support group. 10 managed Windows devices have extension attribute 1 set to privileged workstation. The conditional access architecture must meet 2 requirements using the block grant control to guarantee enforcement. Block access to Microsoft intra resources from devices that do not run Windows. Restrict support group members so they can access the Microsoft Azure Management app only from secure devices tagged as a privileged workstation. Access from any other device must be strictly blocked. Complete the policy architecture by selecting the correct device filter logic. Complete each statement by selecting the appropriate option from its drop-down list. Statement 1. To block non-Windows devices, create a block policy targeted to all users and apps, and configure the device filter to the blank. The choices for Statement 1 are device.operating system, NE Windows, device.operating system, NE Windows, or device.operating system, EQ Windows. Statement 2. To restrict Azure management access to secure devices, create a block policy targeted to support group in the Azure Management app and configure the device filter to the blank. The choices for Statement 2 are Extension Attribute 1, EQ Privileged Workstation, Extension Attribute 1, EQ Privileged Workstation, or Extension Attribute 1, NE Privileged Workstation. For Statement 1, the correct selection is include filtered devices where device.operating system, NE Windows. The policy includes devices that are not Windows, applying the block action to them. For Statement 2, the correct selection is exclude filtered devices where extension attribute 1, EQ, privileged workstation. The policy blocks all devices trying to access the app, but excludes the privileged workstations from the block. Exam tip. To restrict an application to a specific device using device filters, always create a block policy and exclude the approved devices. Do not use an include filter with a grant policy. Question number 164. Scenario. A hybrid organization has Intune enrolled, Microsoft Intra hybrid joined Windows devices, and ADDS domain controllers. The security architecture requires a solution that performs the following for a named local administrator account. Automatically rotate the password every 60 days. Securely back up the password to Microsoft Intra ID for joined devices and ADDS for domain controllers. Ensure the management capability is built into the Windows operating system. Complete the password management design by selecting the solution for each credential type. Complete each statement by selecting the appropriate option from its drop-down list. Statement 1. Manage the custom local administrator account on joined Windows devices by using the blank. The choices for Statement 1 are Windows Lapse, Legacy Microsoft Lapse, or Microsoft Intra Password Protection. Statement 2. Manage and back up the DSRM password on domain controllers by using the blank. The choices for Statement 2 are Windows Lapse, Legacy Microsoft Lapse, or Microsoft Intra Password Protection. For Statement 1, the correct selection is Windows Lapse. Windows Lapse provides automated local password rotation and secure backup to Microsoft Intra ID for domain-joined machines. For Statement 2, the correct selection is Windows Lapse. Windows Lapse natively supports DSRM password rotation and backup to the domain controller object in ADDS. Exam tip. Windows Lapse, not the legacy Microsoft Lapse, is the current integrated solution for both local administrator and DSRM password management. Question number 165. Scenario. A cloud-hosted enterprise application must query directory attributes by using LDAP. User identities originate in Microsoft Intra ID, and the organization does not want to deploy or maintain domain controllers. Which identity service should the architect recommend? The available options are as follows. Option A, Microsoft Intra Private Access. Option B, Pass-Through Authentication. Option C, Microsoft Intra Domain Services. Option D, a Conditional Access Trusted Location. The correct answer is Option C, Microsoft Intra Domain Services. Here's why. Microsoft Intra Domain Services provides managed LDAP, secure LDAP, Kerberos, NTLM, and domain capabilities for identities synchronized from Microsoft Intra ID without requiring customer-managed domain controllers. Why are the other options not correct? A. Intra Private Access provides identity-aware network access to private applications but does not expose a managed LDAP directory. B. Pass-Through Authentication validates cloud sign-ins against on-premises ADDS and does not provide LDAP services to applications. D. A Trusted Location affects conditional access evaluation but does not provide directory protocols or attributes. Exam tip. Use Microsoft Intra Domain Services when legacy applications require LDAP or domain protocols, but self-managed domain controllers should be avoided. Question number 166. Scenario. An organization plans to activate Microsoft Intra Verified ID by using the quick setup experience. The tenant currently uses only its initial on Microsoft.com domain. The security team wants to avoid deploying a dedicated signing key or Azure Key Vault. Which prerequisite should the architect implement first? The available options are as follows. Option A. Create a user-assigned managed identity in the Azure subscription. Option B. Register a custom domain in the Microsoft intratenant. Option C. Create an application service principal in the tenant. Option D. Deploy an Azure Key Vault for verified ID signing keys. The correct answer is Option B. Register a custom domain in the Microsoft intratenant. Here's why. Quick Verified ID setup uses a registered custom tenant domain to verify domain ownership. The Quick Experience manages the shared signing key, decentralized identifier registration, and domain verification without requiring a customer-deployed key vault. Why are the other options not correct? A. A user-assigned managed identity is not a prerequisite for quick setup. C. An application service principal is needed only when integrating a custom issuance or verification application. D. Quick setup uses a Microsoft-managed shared signing key and does not require a dedicated Azure Key Vault. Exam tip. Quick Verified ID setup requires a registered custom domain, but removes the dedicated key vault requirement. Question number 167. Scenario. A financial organization stores regulated information on one SharePoint Online site. A conditional access policy currently protects SharePoint Online broadly. The architect must require the policy only when users access the regulated site by associating the site with a conditional access authentication context. Select and arrange the 3 required actions in the correct order. The available items are as follows. Item 1. Apply a sensitivity label containing the authentication context to the regulated site. Item 2. Create a custom authentication strength for the tenant. Item 3. Configure the conditional access policy to target the authentication context. Item 4. Create an authentication context in Microsoft Intro ID. Item 5. Add a location condition to the conditional access policy. The correct sequence is as follows. First, create an authentication context in Microsoft Intro ID. Second, configure the conditional access policy to target the authentication context. Third, apply a sensitivity label containing the authentication context to the regulated site. Here's why. The authentication context must exist before it can be selected as a conditional access target or embedded in a sensitivity label. After the policy protects the context, applying the labeled context to the site makes the policy effective only when that site is accessed. Exam tip. Authentication context connects a protected application action or site to a specific conditional access policy. Question number 168. Scenario. A software company builds .NET, Python, and Java applications from GitHub Enterprise Cloud repositories. The applications depend extensively on open-source packages, and the repositories are protected by GitHub Advanced Security. The security architecture must identify dependencies that contain publicly disclosed vulnerabilities throughout the development lifecycle. Which capability should the architect recommend? The available options are as follows. Option A. GitHub Secret Scanning. Option B. Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps App Governance. Option C. Dependabot Alerts. Option D. NuGet Audit. The correct answer is Option C, Dependabot Alerts. Here's why. Dependabot analyzes supported dependency manifests and identifies packages with known vulnerabilities. It supports multiple ecosystems, making it suitable for the organization's .NET, Python, and Java repositories. Why are the other options not correct? A. Secret scanning detects exposed credentials and tokens, not vulnerable third-party package versions. B. App governance monitors OAuth-enabled application behavior and permissions in Microsoft 365. D. NuGet Audit assesses NuGet dependencies only and does not cover the Python and Java package ecosystems. Exam tip. Use dependency scanning for vulnerable components and secret scanning for credentials committed to source code. Question number 169. Scenario. An enterprise protects Azure-hosted Windows servers by using Microsoft Defender for Servers Plan 1. The The enterprise will deploy additional Windows servers in AWS and wants the same endpoint detection and server protection capabilities without installing both Azure Arc and a separate endpoint protection sensor, which agent should be deployed directly to the AWS servers. The available options are as follows. Option A, Azure Monitor Agent. Option B, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint Agent. Option C, Log Analytics Agent. Option D, Azure Connected Machine Agent. The correct answer is option B, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint Agent. Here's why. Defender for Servers supports direct onboarding of non-Azure machines through the Defender for Endpoint Agent. This provides core Plan 1 protection for the AWS servers without also deploying the Azure Connected Machine Agent. Why are the other options not correct? A. Azure Monitor Agent collects monitoring data but does not provide Defender for Servers endpoint protection by itself. C. The retired Log Analytics Agent is not the current server protection sensor. D. Azure Connected Machine Agent enables Azure Arc management, but Direct Defender for Endpoint onboarding uses fewer agents when Arc management is not otherwise required. Exam tip. Use Direct Defender for Endpoint onboarding when non-Azure servers require Defender for Servers protection without broader Azure Arc management. Question number 170. Scenario. A hybrid server estate contains Windows and Linux machines. The security team must discover unmanaged servers, identify systems missing critical updates, detect risky installed software, and provide prioritized remediation recommendations from one vulnerability management capability. Which Microsoft security service should the architect recommend? The available options are as follows. Option A, Microsoft Defender Threat Intelligence. Option B, Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management. Option C, Microsoft Defender External Attack Surface Management. Option D, Microsoft Intune Advanced Analytics. The correct answer is option B, Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management. Here's why. Defender Vulnerability Management combines device discovery, software inventory, vulnerability and update assessments, risk prioritization, and remediation workflows. It can identify unmanaged devices and highlight critical updates and risky software on assessed machines. Why are the other options not correct? A. Defender Threat Intelligence supplies external threat and actor intelligence rather than endpoint configuration remediation. C. Defender ESM discovers internet-exposed assets from an external perspective and does not manage internal server vulnerabilities. D. Intune Advanced Analytics focuses on endpoint experience and operational insights rather than server vulnerability assessment. Exam tip. Use Defender Vulnerability Management for endpoint software, update, and configuration risk. Use ESM for outside-in exposure discovery. Question number 171. Scenario. An organization is evaluating automatic virtual machine guest patching for 4 Azure Virtual Machine scale sets. Scale set A uses flexible orchestration and a Windows Server platform image. Scale set B uses uniform orchestration and a custom Windows Server image. Scale set C uses flexible orchestration and a Linux platform image. Scale set D uses uniform orchestration and a custom Linux image. Which scale sets support automatic virtual machine guest patching? The available options are as follows. Option A, Scale set A and Scale set C only. Option B, Scale set B and Scale set D only. Option C, Scale set A only. Option D, Scale set A, Scale set B, Scale set C, and Scale set D. The correct answer is option A, Scale set A and Scale set C only. Here's why. Automatic virtual machine guest patching supports Windows and Linux instances in flexible orchestration scale sets when they use supported platform images. The uniform orchestration scale sets and custom images in the scenario do not satisfy the stated support conditions. Why are the other options not correct? B. Scale set B and Scale set D use uniform orchestration and custom images. C. Scale set C also meets the flexible orchestration and supported platform image requirements. D. The custom image uniform scale sets are not supported by this guest patching configuration. Exam tip. Do not confuse automatic guest patching with automatic OS image upgrades. Their orchestration and image support differ. Question number 172. Scenario. A securities firm has an advisory division and a trading division. Each division includes ordinary employees and members of a compliance team. Employees must communicate only with users in their own division. Compliance personnel must additionally be able to communicate with compliance personnel in the other division. Microsoft Purview Information Barriers multi-segment mode will be used, and the design must minimize configuration objects. Complete the information barriers design. Complete each statement by selecting the appropriate option from its drop-down list. Statement 1. Create a minimum of the blank. The choices for Statement 1 are 2 segments, 3 segments, or 4 segments. Statement 2. Configure a minimum of the blank. The choices for Statement 2 are 4 policies, 2 policies, or 3 policies. For Statement 1, the correct selection is 3 segments. The 2 division segments preserve departmental isolation, while the shared compliance segment creates the cross-division exception. For Statement 2, the correct selection is 3 policies. Multi-segment mode requires allow list policies, and each of the 3 segments receives 1 policy. Exam tip. Multi-segment information barriers can model an exception group that overlaps otherwise isolated organizational segments. Question number 173. Scenario. An organization manages Windows 11 and macOS endpoints through Microsoft Intune. The endpoint architecture will use Microsoft's predefined Intune security baselines and must allow administrators to remotely lock supported non-compliant devices. Identify the platform support for each capability. Complete each statement by selecting the appropriate option from its drop-down list. Statement 1. Intune security baselines are supported for the blank. The choices for Statement 1 are Windows devices only, macOS devices only, or Windows and macOS devices. Statement 2. The Intune remote lock action is supported for the blank. The choices for Statement 2 are Windows and macOS devices, Windows devices only, or macOS devices only. For Statement 1, the correct selection is Windows devices only. Intune security baselines provide predefined Microsoft-recommended Windows security settings. For Statement 2, the correct selection is macOS devices only. Managed macOS devices support the remote lock action, unlike Windows desktop devices in this comparison. Exam tip. Verify Intune remote action and baseline support separately because platform coverage differs by capability. Question number 174. Scenario. A company uses Microsoft Teams for channel conversations and document collaboration. The ransomware resilience design must provide recovery mechanisms for deleted channel messages stored through Exchange Online and mass file corruption affecting documents stored in the Teams SharePoint site. Select the recovery capability for each content type. Complete each statement by selecting the appropriate option from its drop-down list. Statement 1. Recover deleted Teams channel messages by using the blank. The choices for Statement 1 are Exchange Online Protection, the Preservation Hold Library, or Single Item Recovery. Statement 2. Roll back a large collection of corrupted Teams channel files by using the blank. The choices for Statement 2 are Litigation Hold, Files Restore, or the Preservation Hold Library. For Statement 1, the correct selection is Single Item Recovery. Exchange recovery capabilities protect message data stored in the associated mailbox infrastructure. For Statement 2, the correct selection is Files Restore. Files Restore provides point-in-time recovery for files stored in the Teams SharePoint site. Exam tip. Teams messages and files use different underlying Microsoft 365 storage services and therefore different recovery controls. Question number 175. Scenario. An enterprise uses several sanctioned SaaS applications. Its zero-trust architecture requires visibility into user actions across those services and near real-time detection of anomalous activities such as impossible travel, unusual downloads, and suspicious sessions. Which Microsoft security service should the architect recommend? The available options are as follows. Option A, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. Option B, Microsoft Sentinel. Option C, Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. Option D, Microsoft Purview Information Protection. The correct answer is option C, Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. Here's why. Defender for Cloud Apps provides visibility into cloud application activity and uses behavioral analytics and anomaly detection policies to identify risky user and session behavior across connected SaaS services. Why are the other options not correct? A. Defender for Endpoint focuses on endpoint protection and does not provide full SaaS activity governance. B. Sentinel can ingest and correlate SaaS logs, but is not the direct cloud app visibility and session governance service. D. Information protection classifies and protects data, but does not provide real-time SaaS behavioral monitoring. Exam tip. Use Defender for Cloud Apps for SaaS discovery, activity monitoring, application governance, and session controls. Question number 176. Scenario. A development organization is mapping DevSecOps controls to the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework. During development, teams must reduce risks introduced by external packages and component dependencies. After applications enter production, access to application resources must remain explicitly authorized and governed. Select the control associated with each lifecycle stage. Complete each statement by selecting the appropriate option from its drop-down list. Statement 1. For the secure code stage, implement the blank. The choices for Statement 1 are threat modeling, supply chain and dependency management, application access controls, or a secure pipeline. Statement 2. For the secure operations stage, implement the blank. The choices for Statement 2 are a secure pipeline, application access controls, threat modeling, or supply chain and dependency management. For Statement 1, the correct selection is supply chain and dependency management. Dependency governance reduces risks introduced through packages, build artifacts, and external components. For Statement 2, the correct selection is application access controls. Production access controls enforce least privilege after the application becomes operational. Exam tip. Dependency controls protect what enters the code base. Application access controls protect the running workload. Question number 177. Scenario. An Azure estate contains centrally governed platform subscriptions and independently owned workload subscriptions. The security architecture must assess estate-wide compliance with governance controls and provide workload-specific recommendations aligned with the Azure well-architected framework. Map the appropriate Microsoft capability to each requirement. Each capability may be used once, more than once, or not at all. The available source items are as follows. Source item 1, Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Source item 2, Microsoft Sentinel. Source item 3, Microsoft Cloud Security Benchmark. Source item 4, Microsoft Intune. Source item 5, Azure Advisor. Source item 6, Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management. The destination requirements are as follows. Destination A, assess compliance with cloud governance and security policies across the Azure estate. Destination B, review workload-specific recommendations aligned with the Azure well-architected framework. The first correct mapping is assess compliance with cloud governance and security policies across the Azure estate, map to Microsoft Defender for Cloud. The second correct mapping is review workload-specific recommendations aligned with the Azure well-architected framework, map to Azure Advisor. Here's why. Defender for Cloud continuously assesses Azure resources against security policies and governance standards across subscriptions. Azure Advisor provides recommendations for individual workloads based on Azure well-architected framework pillars. Exam tip. Use Defender for Cloud for security posture and policy compliance, and Azure Advisor for workload optimization across well-architected pillars. Question number 178. Scenario. A third-party SaaS platform provides an administrative portal and supports Microsoft Entra single sign-on. Only members of a designated operations group using Microsoft Entra joined devices may access the portal. The organization plans to enforce the requirement through conditional access. Which object must be created first in the Microsoft Entra tenant? The available options are as follows. Option A, a conditional access policy. Option B, an access package. Option C, a Microsoft Entra enterprise application. Option D, an application proxy connector group. The correct answer is option C, a Microsoft intra-enterprise application. Here's why. The SaaS service must first be represented as an enterprise application in the tenant. The organization can then configure assignments and target that application with conditional access requirements for group membership and join device state. Why are the other options not correct? A. A conditional access policy cannot target the SaaS application until the application is represented in the tenant. B. An access package governs access lifecycle, but is not the prerequisite for conditional access targeting. D. Application proxy connector groups publish private on-premises applications and are unnecessary for an external SaaS service. Exam tip. Create or integrate the enterprise application before applying application-specific conditional access. Question number 179. Scenario. An organization requires every Azure resource to contain a governance tag. A custom Azure policy definition must add the tag during resource creation or update and support remediation of existing non-compliant resources through the policy assignment's managed identity. Complete the policy definition design. Complete each statement by selecting the appropriate option from its drop-down list. Statement 1. Include the blank in the effect details to identify the permissions required by the remediation identity. The choices for Statement 1 are existence condition, role definition IDs, or conflict effect. Statement 2. Configure the policy with the blank effect. The choices for Statement 2 are append, modify, or mutate. For Statement 1, the correct selection is Role Definition IDs. This property lists the Azure RBAC roles required by the managed identity. For Statement 2, the correct selection is Modify. Modify supports tag changes during resource operations and remediation of existing resources. Exam tip. A remediable modify policy needs both a managed identity at assignment time and appropriate role definition IDs in the definition. Question number 180. Scenario. An existing Azure storage account currently uses Microsoft Managed Encryption keys. A compatible customer-managed key already exists in Azure Key Vault. The storage account and Vault use the Key Vault Access Policy Authorization model. Select and arrange the 3 actions required to configure the storage account to use the customer-managed key. The available items are as follows. Item 1. Configure the storage account encryption settings to use the Key Vault key. Item 2. Assign a managed identity to the storage account. Item 3. Assign the managed identity to the Key Vault resource. Item 4. Grant the storage account identity the required key permissions through a Key Vault access policy. Item 5. Assign the Key Vault reader role to the storage account identity. Item 6. Create a second managed identity on the Key Vault. The correct sequence is as follows. First, assign a managed identity to the storage account. Second, grant the storage account identity the required key permissions through a Key Vault access policy. Third, configure the storage account encryption settings to use the Key Vault key. Here's why. Azure Storage needs a managed identity before Key Vault can authorize it. After the identity has the required key permissions, the storage account can successfully configure the customer-managed key as its encryption protector. Exam tip. For customer-managed encryption, establish the workload identity and key permissions before selecting the key on the protected resource. Question number 181. Scenario. A company stores application source code in Azure repos and deploys the applications through Azure pipelines. The security team needs repository-integrated secret scanning to identify credentials and keys committed directly into source files. Which capability should the architect recommend? The available options are as follows. Option A, Microsoft Defender for Key Vault. Option B, GitHub Advanced Security for Azure DevOps. Option C, Microsoft DevBox. Option D, Microsoft Defender for Cloud DevOps Security. The correct answer is Option B, GitHub Advanced Security for Azure DevOps. Here's why. GitHub Advanced Security for Azure DevOps integrates secret scanning with Azure repos. It detects supported credentials and secrets committed to repository history and can add preventive controls to the development workflow. Why are the other options not correct? A. Defender for Key Vault detects threats against deployed vault resources and does not scan source repositories. C. Microsoft DevBox provides managed developer workstations rather than source code security testing. D. Defender for Cloud DevOps Security provides posture visibility for connected DevOps environments, but is not the repository secret scanning engine. Exam tip. Use repository native secret scanning to detect hard-coded credentials before they reach deployment pipelines. Question number 182. Scenario. An organization operates a private FTP service in its data center. The required FTP control and data ports are defined in a private application segment. Remote employees must connect through a zero-trust network access architecture that can enforce Microsoft intra-conditional access without exposing the server directly to the internet. Which service should the architect recommend? The available options are as follows. Option A, Azure Application Gateway. Option B, Microsoft Intra-Internet Access. Option C, Microsoft Intra-Application Proxy. Option D, Microsoft Intra-Private Access. Option E, Azure Bastion. The correct answer is option D, Microsoft Intra-Private Access. Here's why. Intra-Private Access provides identity-aware zero-trust access to private applications and supported TCP-based resources. It can enforce conditional access while keeping the FTP server private and avoiding direct inbound internet exposure. Why are the other options not correct? A. Application Gateway protects and routes HTTP and HTTPS applications rather than private FTP access. B. Intra-internet access secures traffic to public internet and Microsoft services, not private data center resources. C. Application Proxy publishes supported private web applications and is not the general private TCP access solution. E. Azure Bastion provides RDP and SSH connectivity and does not publish an FTP service. Exam tip. Use intra-private access for identity-centric access to private applications and non-web protocols. Question number 183. Scenario. 2 Azure subscriptions belong to different Microsoft intra-tenants. Each subscription contains 20 virtual networks. Azure Virtual Network Manager cross-tenant scope connections will be configured. The network design must use NSGS to deny SSH on the 20th virtual network in each tenant. Use security admin rules to always allow approved SSH traffic on those 2 networks despite the NSG denies. Deny SSH on the remaining 38 virtual networks. Deny FTP on all 40 virtual networks. Minimize the number of management components. Which component design should the architect recommend? The available options are as follows. Option A, 1 virtual network manager instance, 1 security admin rule collection, and 2 NSGS. Option B, 2 virtual network manager instances, each with 1 security admin rule collection and 1 NSG. Option C, 1 virtual network manager instance, 2 security admin rule collections, and 2 NSGS. Option D, 2 virtual network manager instances, each with 2 security admin rule collections and 2 NSGS. The correct answer is option A, 1 virtual network manager instance, 1 security admin rule collection, and 2 NSGS. Here's why. A virtual network manager can manage networks across tenants through scope connections. 1 rule collection can contain the always allow SSH rule for the 2 exception networks and deny rules for SSH and FTP. Each exception virtual network requires its own NSG containing the lower level SSH deny. Why are the other options not correct? B. A separate manager per tenant is unnecessary when cross-tenant scope connections are configured. C. Separate rule collections are unnecessary because the required rules can coexist in 1 collection and use network groups for targeting. D. This design duplicates both manager and rule collection resources and increases administration. Exam tip. Security admin always allow rules take precedence over conflicting NSG rules, while ordinary allow rules do not. Question number 184. Scenario. A protected Windows server in a data center cannot connect directly to the internet. A separate backup server can communicate with Azure and must back up the protected server's data to an Azure recovery service. Complete the backup architecture. Complete each statement by selecting the appropriate option from its drop-down list. Statement 1. Deploy the blank in the data center. The choices for Statement 1 are the Microsoft Azure Recovery Services agent on the protected server, Microsoft Azure Backup Server, or an Azure Virtual Machine extension. Statement 2. Store and manage the cloud backups by using the blank. The choices for Statement 2 are an Azure Backup Vault, Azure Storage Block Blobs, or a Recovery Services Vault. For Statement 1, the correct selection is Microsoft Azure Backup Server. MABS acts as the local backup intermediary for the isolated protected server. For Statement 2, the correct selection is a Recovery Services Vault. MABS registers with a Recovery Services Vault for Azure-based backup retention and recovery. Exam tip. Use MARS for direct agent-to-vault backup and MABS when local backup orchestration or an isolated protected server is required. Question number 185. Scenario. A company has custom sensitive information types in Microsoft Purview. It must use those definitions to discover regulated data in Azure Blob Storage accounts and in files stored on on-premises Windows network shares. Select the Microsoft Purview capability for each data source. Complete each statement by selecting the appropriate option from its drop-down list. Statement 1. Scan and classify the Azure Blob Storage assets by using the blank. The choices for Statement 1 are Microsoft Purview Compliance Manager, Microsoft Purview Data Map, Microsoft Purview Insider Risk Management, or the Microsoft Purview Information Protection Scanner. Statement 2. Scan and classify the on-premises shared folders by using the blank. The choices for Statement 2 are Microsoft Purview Insider Risk Management, the Microsoft Purview Information Protection Scanner, Microsoft Purview Data Map, or Microsoft Purview Compliance Manager. For Statement 1, the correct selection is Microsoft Purview Data Map. Data Map connects to supported Azure data sources and performs cataloging and classification scans. For Statement 2, the correct selection is the Microsoft Purview Information Protection Scanner. The scanner discovers and classifies files accessible through on-premises file paths. Exam tip. Use Data Map for governed cloud data source scanning and the Information Protection Scanner for on-premises file repositories. Question number 186. Scenario. A retailer hosts an order processing API in Azure App Service. The API connects to an Azure SQL database by using credentials from a shared Microsoft intra-user account. A contractor recently used the same account to connect to the database interactively. The security architect must eliminate reusable credentials and ensure that the database identity can be used only by the app service workload. Ongoing administration must be minimized. Which authentication approach should the architect recommend? The available options are as follows. Option A. Configure a federated identity credential for the deployment pipeline. Option B. Assign a managed identity to the app service app. Option C. Configure a group managed service account for the application. Option D. Place the shared user account under Microsoft Intra-Privileged Identity Management. The correct answer is Option B. Assign a managed identity to the app service app. Here's why. A managed identity gives the app service workload a Microsoft Intra identity without requiring a stored username, password, certificate, or client secret. Azure SQL can authorize that identity directly, preventing developers from reusing application credentials interactively. Why are the other options not correct? A federated identity credential is primarily used to establish trust with an external workload, such as a deployment pipeline. It is unnecessary for a native app service to Azure SQL connection. C. A group managed service account is intended for supported domain-joined Windows workloads and is not the preferred identity mechanism for Azure App Service. D. Privileged identity management governs activation of privileged roles. It does not convert a shared service account credential into a workload-bound identity. Exam tip. For Azure-hosted applications accessing supported Azure resources, prefer managed identities over reusable service account credentials. Question number 187. Scenario. An insurance portal hosted in Azure App Service must call a legacy partner API that accepts only a username and password. The password must be held in a dedicated secrets management service, and the portal must retrieve it without storing another application credential. Complete the security architecture recommendation. Complete each statement by selecting the appropriate option from its drop-down list. Statement 1. Store the partner API password in the blank. The choices for Statement 1 are Microsoft Intra ID Protection, Azure Key Vault, or Microsoft Intra Privileged Identity Management. Statement 2. Allow the app service application to retrieve the password by using the blank. The choices for Statement 2 are a managed identity, a guest user account, or a client secret embedded in the application configuration. For Statement 1, the correct selection is Azure Key Vault. Key Vault is the purpose-built Azure service for centrally securing passwords, secrets, keys, and certificates. For Statement 2, the correct selection is a managed identity. The application can authenticate through its workload identity and receive only the required Key Vault permissions. Exam tip. A secure secrets design normally combines Key Vault for storage with a managed identity for passwordless application authentication. Question number 188. Scenario. A manufacturing organization enables Defender Cloud Security Posture Management for its Azure estate. The security team wants secure score recommendations to align with Microsoft's foundational cloud security controls. Remediation priorities must also reflect contextual risk and the importance of affected assets. Complete the posture management design. Complete each statement by selecting the appropriate option from its drop-down list. Statement 1. Use the blank as the foundational security policy. The choices for Statement 1 are a custom Azure Policy Initiative, Microsoft Cloud Security Benchmark, or CS Microsoft Azure Foundations Benchmark. Statement 2. Expect secure score prioritization to consider the blank. The choices for Statement 2 are built-in security recommendations only, built-in security recommendations and risk prioritization rankings only, or built-in security recommendations, risk prioritization rankings, and critical asset classifications. For Statement 1, the correct selection is Microsoft Cloud Security Benchmark. The benchmark is the default Microsoft security baseline used to assess cloud resource posture. For Statement 2, the correct selection is built-in security recommendations, risk prioritization rankings, and critical asset classifications. Defender CSPM uses contextual risk and resource criticality to improve the relevance of secure score remediation priorities. Exam tip. Do not interpret secure score as a simple count of failed controls. Current posture prioritization also reflects exposure context and asset importance. Question number 189. Scenario. A healthcare organization uses Microsoft 365 and Microsoft Purview. Its privacy office needs a low-maintenance way to evaluate how the tenant aligns with regional privacy regulations governing personally identifiable information. The solution must provide control mappings and recommended improvement actions. Which Microsoft Purview capability should the architect recommend? The available options are as follows. Option A, Microsoft Purview Information Protection. Option B, Microsoft Purview Insider Risk Management. Option C, Microsoft Purview Compliance Manager. Option D, Microsoft Purview Data Loss Prevention. The correct answer is Option C, Microsoft Purview Compliance Manager. Here's why. Compliance Manager provides regulation-based assessments, map controls, compliance scoring, and improvement actions. It reduces the manual effort required to interpret privacy requirements and track the organization's progress. Why are the other options not correct? A. Information protection classifies and labels information, but does not provide a complete regulatory assessment and improvement action framework. B. Insider risk management identifies potentially risky user behavior rather than assessing regulatory compliance. D. Data loss prevention controls inappropriate data sharing, but does not provide end-to-end regulation mappings and assessment guidance. Exam tip. Choose Compliance Manager when the requirement centers on regulatory assessments, control mappings, evidence, and improvement actions. Question number 190. Scenario. A consulting company operates offices in several jurisdictions and licenses all employees with Microsoft 365 E5. The governance team wants to assess the tenant against country-specific regulations and receive recommended actions for closing compliance gaps. The architect must also identify the likely additional licensing requirement for assessments that are not included with the subscription. Complete the recommendation. Complete each statement by selecting the appropriate option from its drop-down list. Statement 1. Perform the assessments by using the blank. The choices for Statement 1 are Microsoft Purview Compliance Manager, Microsoft Defender for Cloud Regulatory Compliance, Microsoft Purview Audit Premium, or Microsoft Priva Privacy Risk Management. Statement 2. Budget for the blank when required country-specific assessments are premium templates. The choices for Statement 2 are Microsoft Purview Data Map Capacity Units, Microsoft Syntex Pay-as-you-go billing, licenses for premium regulatory templates, or Microsoft Priva Privacy Risk Management licenses. For Statement 1, the correct selection is Microsoft Purview Compliance Manager. Compliance Manager evaluates Microsoft 365 controls against selected regulations and tracks remediation activities. For Statement 2, the correct selection is Licenses for Premium Regulatory Templates. Premium assessment templates can require additional licensing beyond the templates included with Microsoft 365 E5. Exam tip. Separate the Compliance Manager service entitlement from the licensing of individual premium assessment templates. Question number 191. Scenario. A financial services organization uses Microsoft 365 E5. Its security architecture must address two attack paths. A password spray campaign attempts to compromise employee identities from the internet. A compromised internal identity begins downloading an abnormal volume of documents from SharePoint Online. Select the security capability for each attack path. Complete each statement by selecting the appropriate option from its drop-down list. Statement 1. Detect and automatically respond to risky password spray sign-ins by using the blank. The choices for Statement 1 are Microsoft Defender for Identity, Microsoft Intra ID Protection, Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, or Microsoft Intra ID Governance. Statement 2. Detect and control anomalous SharePoint Online exfiltration by using the blank. The choices for Statement 2 are Microsoft Defender for Cloud, Microsoft Defender for Identity, Microsoft Intra ID Protection, or Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. For Statement 1, the correct selection is Microsoft Intra ID Protection. Identity protection evaluates risky users and sign-ins and integrates with risk-based conditional access policies. For Statement 2, the correct selection is Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. Defender for Cloud Apps provides behavioral analytics, anomaly detection, and cloud app governance for SharePoint Online activity. Exam tip. Use identity protection for risky authentication events and Defender for Cloud Apps for anomalous behavior inside SaaS applications. Question number 192. Scenario. A software company will provision an isolated Azure environment for every business-critical application. Each environment must have its own subscription boundary, virtual networks, network security groups, key vaults, Azure policy assignments, and role-based access control assignments. The environments must be deployed repeatedly through infrastructure as code by using Microsoft-supported landing zone patterns. Complete the architecture recommendation. Complete each statement by selecting the appropriate option from its drop-down list. Statement 1. Deploy each workload into an application the blank. The choices for Statement 1 are Resource Group, Landing Zone, Management Group, or Private Cloud. Statement 2. Implement the reusable deployment modules by using the blank. The choices for Statement 2 are PowerShell or Azure CLI, ARM templates or portal exports, or Bicep or Terraform. For Statement 1, the correct selection is Landing Zone. An application landing zone contains the workload subscriptions and inherited governance controls needed for a secure Azure environment. For Statement 2, the correct selection is Bicep or Terraform. Both technologies support declarative, repeatable landing zone deployment through infrastructure as code. Exam tip. A management group organizes and governs subscriptions. The workload itself is deployed into an application landing zone. You have completed Part 5 of the SC-100 practice series. Continue your preparation by opening the complete playlist and watching the remaining parts in sequence. Please like this video, subscribe to Tech with Kaushik, and enable notifications for more certification exam preparation content. Share your score, questions, or feedback in the comments. Thank you for watching. See you in the next part.